Produced by Podcast Architects.
You're listening to the Lead On podcast, where we discuss experiences in the armed forces while exploring lessons from military leaders.
Hey, welcome to Lead On, Lessons from Military Leaders. I'm David Deary, your host and president of the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. And to speak leadership, joining me today is none other than Jim Rich. He's the vice president of the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. And Jim's a 30-year Navy veteran. Jim retired some years ago as a command master chief. And prior to that, he was an electronic technician, not to be confused with an electrician's mate. Jim, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. So thanks for joining me on this episode of Lead On. Tell us, what's the worst piece of leadership advice somebody's ever given you?
So on my first ship, when I was a third class petty officer, E4, there was an E5 RM who told me that the only way to promote and get ahead was to kiss ass. And I was shocked. However, he retired at 30 years as a master chief as well. So perhaps that pathway worked for him, but it was not one that I chose to pursue.
30 years in the military. Tell us about your early life. Where'd you, how old were you when you joined? Where were you living? And why did you join?
I joined a little late, comparatively speaking. I was living in the bustling metropolis of Barstow, California. And if you don't know where that is, and get in a car in Los Angeles and drive to Las Vegas. And when you stop for gas in McDonald's, because you will, you'll stop in Barstow. And that's what we were famous for. I'd tried several jobs and looked at some education, and nothing seemed to work for me and my wife and my two kids. And so I went in and talked to a recruiter, and the next thing you know, I was raising my right hand.
And why did you choose to be an electronics technician and not an electronics mate?
They offered me a data systems technician, fire control technician, and electronics technician. And all I wanted was training to get a job. And I looked at the description of the jobs that those 2 or 3 ratings did, and electronics technician looked like it correlated better to civilian sector. And so that's why I chose it.
So in those 30 years, how many ships did you serve on?
I served on, so I was attached to ship's company to 3 ships, USS Gary, FFG 51, USS Boxer, LHD-4, and USS Ronald Reagan, CVN 76. But I did a couple other sea duty tours, one with Naval Special Warfare, the mobile comm team. There was a lot of ground time, and another one as the command master chief of VAW 117. And so we would attach ourselves to whatever aircraft carrier our CAG belonged to. Started as the Nimitz and ended up on the Truman.
One of my favorite port visits actually was Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, we had now become from radio into ITs, and used to get some bootleg, I guess, CDs back in the day from Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a pretty cool port visit, though, myself, and get some really good suits made in Hong Kong, which I probably still have 1 or 2 I would never wear again, though. I don't know. How about you? Hong Kong bring back any memories? Hong
Kong brings back more memories than I can, and we can talk about right here. I'm a runner, and I'm also an alcoholic, a sober, recovering alcoholic, and I like to hash. That's not I like hash. I like hashing. Hashing is hash house harriers. It's commonly described as drinkers with a running problem. So they have what they call a hound and hounds and a hare. And so the hare is somebody who lays out the trail. They go out, they lay a trail, and then the hounds follow. And there's all kinds of debauchery and false trails and drinking and singing and great and wonderful times. And in Hong Kong, the Wan Chai Hash House Harriers have a typhoon hash. So when the H8, as in hotel 8, the number 8, flag flies, that means that there's heavy winds coming and a typhoon's coming. And it's broken up into 12-hour segments. So if it flies at night going into the morning, they meet at a certain place. And if it flies in the morning going into the afternoon, then they'll meet at another place. And these crazies will go run a hash prior to a typhoon. Now, I thought this was a wonderful idea because why not? However, that doesn't really correlate to the Navy's core values and leadership as it goes. So I did what a good sailor is supposed to do, and I followed the direction, went back to the ship. We sortied. We did leave over 100 people behind in Hong Kong because they just didn't make it. And getting them back was something fierce. But I read the race report for for that hash, and the winds weren't as strong as they were, and the people were talking a bit of trash. But yeah, Hong Kong was something else. I have other hash stories as well that are safe for public consumption.
From a leadership perspective, is there some sort of, why would you do a hash? Why would you be a hash runner, which is associated with drinking, being a recovering alcoholic, and put yourself in an environment surrounding alcohol, if you will? And second part, I would be curious on is, as a leader, how has your past with alcohol helped you when it comes to leading others that may or may not have an alcohol problem, but at least alcohol always seemed to be a precursor to any sailors that got into trouble.
I led a destructive lifestyle as I got into my teenage years, and my battles with alcohol were alcohol was winning. Alcohol was winning the war for me, and I was disappointing friends and family left and right, almost like knocking down dominoes. My destructive behavior reached its pinnacle, if you will, at the moment, whatever my bottom happened to be, and I got sober, and I got sober roughly a year and a half and some change into my career, and I put myself in positions with people that guided me into a place where I didn't have the desire to drink. And so as somebody who's sober, when you go into a Liberty port, right, and you have to have a Liberty buddy, almost everybody wants to go drink. I mean, almost everybody wants to go drink, or the people that don't are not necessarily people that have the same interests that I do. And so I quickly realized that in order to do certain things, I had to make certain concessions. And I was on solid ground with my desire to drink. And my favorite hash story is hashing in Singapore. So I took a brand new chief petty officer and two other chief petty officers, all that worked for me, and said, come on, guys, let's go. And here's the deal. Hashing gets you into the community, and you get to meet people. You get to meet expatriates from different countries, and you get to meet locals. And you're away from all of the hustle and bustle and the nonsense that normal sailors are happening to get into. And really, if you just moderate, it's dirty fun because you're out there running. So we start this hash run and we head into the jungle. And there's like little cups that are tapping rubber from rubber trees. And if you've ever got that on you, that stuff stinks to high heaven, right? So we're running by. There's signs that say unexploded ordnance. My friends are freaking out. Later on, we find out that there were crocodiles and snakes in this jungle. And of course, I guess that's where crocodiles and snakes reside. But the sun is starting to go down. And I looked at one of the locals and I said, hey, how long before it gets dark? And they're like, about 15 minutes, mate. And I was like, how far are we in the jungle? They're about 25. And I looked at my friends and I said, stick with the local, don't let go, right? And their eyes got big, and I was like, we don't want to get lost in the jungle. So we finished up, we go to the down, and we have a great time. And then they asked us, would you guys like to go to the restaurant with us? And we did. And we got to meet these people, and we got to talk, and we got to share our stories, and they shared their stories. They shared where they were from, why they left the country they were in, and why they were in Singapore. And there was exposure to different cultures and different things that we just wouldn't see if we were at the local bar, 200 yards from the pier. And I just don't drink. I have zero desire to drink. So I kind of shepherded my chiefs, if you will, into something that they would have not done before. And I do it again and again and again if I could, because I get to meet the most fantastic people.
I don't know if you remember, kind of late in our careers, we transitioned out not too far apart from each other. The and I believe it's still around today. The CSAT, Coalition Sailors Against Destructive Decisions, which is all about taking liberty, going in these foreign ports as well as in your home port, and doing things aside from alcohol. So as a leader yourself that experienced the benefits of doing something like you just described, without the use of alcohol, and how you benefited, and you knew your chiefs would benefit, what other ways, what other suggestions would you have for leaders, as they send their troops, at the end of the day, going out or on a deployment? What would you suggest that they do, and how would you motivate them to go do these alternative things that don't involve alcohol?
I talk real. I talk plain language. I talk like an alcoholic because I am one. So what I do is there were times as a leader that I would have to, I'd always have my Master Chief hat on, or my chief hat, or whatever hat on. I'd have my Navy hat on, right? And if it was a disciplinary situation, I would have to counsel or levy whatever was necessary because that's the job. And I would constantly get people coming to me off the side. Hey, can you talk to my person, my sailor? Can you do this? They've got a problem with this. And I would tell my story. So I kind of split it, like wear two hats, right? And so what I would do is I would explain my behavior. I would explain my behavior in a manner that they understood. Because when I start to tell my story and people start to nod their head like, oh, I've done that, right? And they kind of hide their head a little bit in shame. Like, and I'm not going to get into instances, but if you've had them, you've had them. If you haven't, you haven't, right? And I would tell stories and laugh about things that other people would shudder at. And it's like, as an alcoholic, we take light in some of the things that we have done after the fact. Whereas the normal person, as we would call them, normies, would sit there and just recoil like, whoa, you did what? And why are you laughing about that? And it's, well, because I made it through the other side. And as an alcoholic, it's kind of a shared struggle, so to speak, right? And if I've shared my struggle with you and you're still in the midst of your struggle, and you see that I'm no longer in that struggle, then you might come talk to me. And that's the best I can hope for. I can't make you come talk to me. I can't make somebody sober. So I just tell my story. I just tell my story, and if they relate, which normally they do, whether they're ready to get it or not, and then I explain to them there is this, and this, and you can go out with so, and so, and you can do it. I've ended up with more proteges than I can count, based on somebody coming to me and saying, this person is on their last leg. They're going to get thrown out if they go up for punishment, and this is levied. If not, will you talk to him? And I'm like, I'll talk to him regardless. And I'm still in contact with a number of those people today. So that's what I do.
And that's fantastic. It really reminds me of being an empathetic leader, right? You're sharing of your story, which leaders really we need to do. And I think in the military, we especially as a senior military leader, we need more to be able to share who they are, to share of their failures, to be transparent, and because that empathy will draw others to you. So to be able to share, and we can go off track and even talk about the bond that we have as military, right? And share those common struggles, common stories, which you why you're able to, and we can laugh at some of those things that probably if we were to share on this venue, people would shudder at and would not believe that we would laugh at such things. But understanding so much has to be into context or in the setting in which we in which we grew up, right? But you mentioned something that reminded me. When you say you wear your hat, whether it's your master chief hat or your chief hat or whatever leadership position hat that you happen to be in, right? Because when you say that, it's like this is the position I'm at as a leader. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a positional leader, but just recognize that hat. There's a certain level of authority that you have based on the hat that you're wearing at the time. But you did a talk recently on microaggressions, and I think that I really how do microaggressions, the do better and don't be mean, tie into the hat that you wear?
First off, when I volunteered to do a talk on microaggressions because I thought it was something else. And I volunteered to do that talk because I thought that it would help me get some insight into some behaviors that I had, and I would learn from that and become better. And in a sense, it did. It just was a different definition. I thought it was rolling the eyes and being sarcastic and just being a general pain in the ass to leaders or peers or subordinates. But it wasn't. It was actions and behaviors and patterns of speech and phrases and things that are used, whether conscious or subconscious, to marginalize groups of people. And then I looked at that and I was like, oh, I volunteered for this. Now I can't back out. And then I looked at it and I thought, oh, I've done some of this, And so I started to, I went down the rabbit hole and there were things that I had done consciously and subconsciously and in groups of settings of very close friends. And then, where like I could say it with these three people because we know and love each other and know where we stand. But if somebody else heard it, it would be like, you're this, or you're that, or I can't believe you said this. And so you don't say that. So what I looked at as I was beginning to develop this talk was, we could all do better. We just do better. And I have to be able to say that to you. And my want is that you're able to hear it and understand that I'm not saying that you're bad. I'm just saying do better, right? If I can't look at my life and the way I do things, and I can't take a little bit of guidance or even criticism, don't say criticism and say, hey, Jim, you could have said this way. You could have been a little more sympathetic, empathetic, whatever, a little more kind in your delivery. How about you try and do better? It's like, gotcha. That's not a slam on me. And the other one is just simply don't be mean. I hate to say hate, but I dislike when somebody says, I'm brutally honest. And it's like, that's not a free pass to be mean, right? You just don't be mean. Well, I don't want to sugarcoat anything. There's several ways to give somebody some news or say something to somebody without attacking them. It just is, right? So do better, don't be mean. It's quite simple. And I don't know. Those are kind of watchwords for me to live by right now.
But I'm always curious: is there any leadership bad decision that you made that had a successful outcome?
No. I say that in jest. I've made several incorrect decisions. But one that comes to mind in particular was when I was on Boxer. I got there right after 9/11, and we had a commanding officer he took force protection so seriously, David, that ships would not pull into the pier if they could take another day at sea and pull into another pier because our CO was so strict. So for those of you that don't understand the military, it's like we're all going to volunteer to stay away from our families for another day or two because we don't want to park where this guy has so many rules. That's how bad this guy was. So we were getting ready to do an assessment with Float Training Group, and I was the force protection officer of choice based on some things. And so I got my team together And I told them that, your perimeter, your gun mount on the ship is where you're at. And if you can only see this much, that's all you're responsible for. What you hear on the radio, what you see, you're only responsible for this. And we trained for them to be responsible. And so we're at anchor, it's dark, and they're going to send a boat our way. And this boat is going to attack us. And there are rules of engagement. And with me, if we follow all the rules of engagement, there is no delay. After all the rules of engagement are followed, if the threat is there, we're going to open fire. And we'll deal with whatever aftermath later. So they didn't send one boat, they sent two. Tricky little guys, right? And I accidentally called out port instead of starboard. And the sailors that were on my team understood that I made an error. And the sailor on the starboard side lit up that boat. And so we took out the second boat. We took out the first one, we took out the second boat, and we did it with lights. So I actually mean figuratively and literally lit that boat up. They lit that boat up and we passed. And everybody thought I was the hero. And it's like, I'm not the hero. Did you hear me? I said port and not starboard, right? And that second class petty officer that was out there had the wherewithal to pay attention to the training and pay attention to the situation and do what he was supposed to do and follow the rules of engagement and open fire. And had they listened the other way, that boat would have lit us up, we would have failed, and had it been real, there'd have been casualties.
Well, Jim, once again, thank you for joining us today on Lead On, Lessons in Leadership, the Enlisted Leadership Foundation podcast. Join us every 1st and 15th military paydays for another episode of Lead On. And until next time, continue to lead on in whatever capacity you find yourself. Bye-bye.